Every family has that one recipe that defines them, passed down through generations like a treasured heirloom. But what happened when Marcus Johnson stood at the Family Feud podium and gave an answer about his grandmother's cornbread would not only win his family an unprecedented amount of money, but would also launch a culinary revolution that changed how America thinks about soul food and family traditions. Before we dive into this incredible story that proves how honoring our elders' wisdom can transform lives, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This is a story you'll want to share with your own family, especially if you have precious recipes hiding in your kitchen drawers. The Johnson family from Memphis, Tennessee, had been selected for Family Feud's special Heritage Month tournament in October 2024. This wasn't just any regular taping. It was a tournament celebrating American families who had preserved their cultural traditions through food. The winning family would receive $100,000, 5 times the usual grand prize. Marcus Johnson, a 4-year-old high school history teacher, stood as the anchor for his family team. Beside him were his sister, Keisha, a nurse at Jude Children's Hospital, his cousin DeAndre, who ran a small auto repair shop, his Aunt Patricia, who taught Sunday school, and his 2-year-old grandmother, whom everyone called Big Mama. She sat in the back, wearing her favorite purple church dress and the pearl necklace she'd worn to every important family event for 50 years. The Johnsons weren't just playing for money. 3 months earlier, Big Mama had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. The family had noticed her forgetting names and dates, though she could still recall every ingredient in her recipes with perfect clarity. Marcus had entered the family into the tournament hoping to create one last beautiful memory while Big Mama could still fully participate. What none of them knew was that this appearance would preserve Big Mama's legacy in ways they never imagined. Their opponents were the Petrova family from Chicago, Russian immigrants who had built a successful chain of bakeries. Both families had brought samples of their signature dishes to share with the studio audience before taping, a gesture that would prove more significant than anyone realized. Steve Harvey had been briefed about the special nature of this tournament. Each family had submitted video essays about their food traditions, and the producers had been particularly moved by the Johnson family's story. Big Mama had been cooking for her Memphis community for over 50 years, feeding anyone who was hungry, regardless of their ability to pay. Her small kitchen had become legendary in their neighborhood, especially her Sunday dinners after church. The main game had been intense. Both families had played brilliantly, their answers reflecting deep cultural knowledge about food and family traditions. The Petrovas had taken an early lead with their knowledge of baking terms and European cuisine, but the Johnsons had fought back with answers about Southern cooking, church potlucks, and family reunions. Throughout the game, Big Mama had been unusually quiet. Marcus kept glancing back at her, worried that the lights and noise might be overwhelming, but she sat there with a serene smile, occasionally whispering encouragement to her family. During one commercial break, she had walked over to Marcus and pressed something into his hand. A small piece of paper with her cornbread recipe written in her shaky handwriting. "You might need this," she had said cryptically, patting his cheek the way she had when he was a child. The game came down to the final round. The score was tied at 299 points each. Steve announced that due to the special tournament rules, the next question would be worth double points, and the winning family would go straight to fast money for the $100,000 prize. "We surveyed 100 people," Steve said, building the tension. "Name something a grandmother's recipe might be famous for in her community." Marcus had buzzed in first, his hand moving almost involuntarily. As he stood at the podium, he felt the piece of paper in his pocket. Remembered all the Sunday dinners, all the church functions, all the times Big Mama had gotten up at dawn to cook for someone in need. "Steve," Marcus said, his voice clear and strong. "Big Mama's cornbread. Her cornbread brings people together. It's not just food, it's communion, it's love, it's healing. Her cornbread is famous for making people feel like they're home, even when home is 1,000 miles away." Steve Harvey stood silent for a moment. The studio audience was completely quiet. Even the production crew had stopped what they were doing. This wasn't just an answer. It was a testimony. A declaration of love across generations. "Show me Big Mama's cornbread," Steve called out. The board flipped. Number 1 answer: bringing people together. Community. 67 points. The studio erupted. The Johnsons had won the main game with 366 points. But more importantly, Marcus's complete answer had been captured on camera, and something about the raw honesty of it had moved everyone in the room. Several audience members were wiping away tears, but the game wasn't over. Now came fast money, with $100,000 at stake. The family huddled to decide who would play. Big Mama, who had been quiet all game, suddenly stood up. "I'll go first," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. The family exchanged worried glances. Fast money was intense, requiring quick thinking and clear answers. But the determination in Big Mama's eyes was unmistakable. Marcus would go second. They decided. If anyone could bring it home, it would be the grandson who had just given the answer of a lifetime. Big Mama walked to the podium with a dignity that made her seem taller than her 5'2" frame. Steve Harvey approached her gently, aware of the moment's significance. "Now, Big Mama," Steve said softly, "you know how this works. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You've got 20 seconds. You just say the first thing that comes to your mind." Big Mama nodded, placing her weathered hands on the podium. "I've been answering quick questions in my kitchen for 50 years, Mr. Harvey. I'm ready." The timer started. "Name a spice every kitchen needs." "Salt," Big Mama answered, without hesitation. "How many hours should you marinate meat?" 24. Name something you pass down to your children. Recipes and wisdom. What temperature do you bake a cake? 350 degrees. Name a dish that brings families together. Sunday roast. With all the fixings. The buzzer sounded. Big Mama had answered all 5 questions clearly and confidently. The audience gave her a standing ovation as she walked back to her seat. "Big Mama just showed us how it's done," Steve said, clearly impressed. "Let's see how you did." The answers revealed one by one. Salt was the number 1 answer with 31 points. 24 hours was up there with 8 points. Recipes was the second answer with 24 points. 350 degrees was number 1 with 44 points. Sunday roast was third with 12 points. Big Mama had scored 119 points. The family needed just 81 more to win $100,000. Marcus approached the podium, his heart pounding. The piece of paper with the cornbread recipe seemed to pulse in his pocket. He thought about all the times Big Mama had fed, not just their family, but their entire neighborhood. How she'd taught him that food was never just about eating. It was about nurturing souls. "All right, Marcus," Steve said. "Big Mama got you 119 points. You need 81 for that $100,000. Let's remind everybody, this is 5 times the normal grand prize, folks. This is life-changing money." Marcus nodded, trying to calm his nerves. 20 seconds on the clock, Steve announced. "Give me 81 points for $100,000. Here we go." The timer started. Name a spice every kitchen needs. Marcus thought of Big Mama's spice rack. Black pepper. How many hours should you marinate meat? Overnight, 12 hours. Name something you pass down to your children. Family traditions. What temperature do you bake a cake? Marcus remembered helping Big Mama in the kitchen. 375 degrees. Name a dish that brings families together. Without hesitation, grandmother's cornbread. The buzzer sounded. The audience was on the edge of their seats. Marcus had given different answers from Big Mama on all 5 questions. A risky strategy that could either win them everything or fall just short. Steve began revealing Marcus's answers with dramatic flair. "You said black pepper for a spice every kitchen needs. Your grandmother said salt, which was the number 1 answer. You need 81 points for $100,000. How many people said black pepper? The board revealed. 28 points. Total, 147. All right. You said 12 hours for marinating meat. Big Mama said 24. Survey said 15 points appeared. Total, 162. You're doing great. You said family traditions for something you passed down. Big Mama said recipes and wisdom. Survey said the number one answer, 41 points. Total, 203. The audience erupted. They only needed 200 points total, which meant they had already won the $100,000. But Steve continued. The moment too perfect to rush. Now we've already got our winners here, but let's finish this out. You said 375 degrees for baking a cake, survey said. 18 points. Total, 221. And finally, Steve said, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper, you said grandmother's cornbread. For a dish that brings families together. Big Mama said Sunday roast. Let's see if grandmother's cornbread is up there. The board revealed the answer. Number one answer, 46 points. Total, 267 points. The studio exploded into chaos. It was one of the highest fast money scores in the show's history. But what happened next would transform this moment from a game show victory into something much more significant. Big Mama had stood up and was walking toward Marcus with tears streaming down her face. The cameras captured as she embraced her grandson, whispering something in his ear that the microphones picked up clearly. You remembered what matters. Steve Harvey, never one to miss the significance of a moment, asked Marcus what his grandmother had whispered to him during the game. Marcus pulled out the piece of paper from his pocket. She gave me her cornbread recipe, Steve. But it wasn't just a recipe. Look at what she wrote at the bottom. He held up the paper, and the camera zoomed in. Below the ingredients and instructions, in Big Mama's shaky handwriting, were the words, "The secret ingredient is love. Feed people like they're your own family. That's how you change the world, one meal at a time." Steve was visibly moved. Big Mama, you've been feeding your Ben self community for 50 years. Tell us about that cornbread. Big Mama, now holding Marcus's hand, spoke with a clarity that her family hadn't heard in months. Mr. Harvey, I learned that recipe from my grandmother, who learned it from hers. It goes back to slavery times, when our ancestors had to make something beautiful from whatever they had. That cornbread isn't just food. It's history. It's survival. It's proof that we can create joy, even in hardship. She continued, her voice growing stronger. Every Sunday after church, anybody who's hungry comes to my house. Doesn't matter if they have money or not. Doesn't matter what color they are or where they come from. We sit at the table together. We eat that cornbread. And for that moment, we're all family. The audience was completely silent, many wiping away tears. But Big Mama wasn't finished. I've been diagnosed with dementia, Mr. Harvey. I'm starting to forget things. Names, dates, sometimes faces. But I remember every ingredient in Nadamentary, every recipe I've ever made. I remember the look on someone's face when they taste something made with love. That's what I wanted my family to understand today. Some things are too important to forget. Steve Harvey did something then that had never happened in Family Feud history. He called for the cameras to keep rolling and asked Big Mama if she would teach him and the audience how to make her cornbread right there on the stage. What followed was 15 minutes of unscripted television magic. The production assistants quickly brought out a portable cooking station. Big Mama, with Marcus assisting, demonstrated her cornbread recipe while sharing stories about her life, her community, and the power of food to heal divisions. She talked about feeding civil rights workers in the 1,960 seconds, about keeping her kitchen open during the Memphis riots, about teaching young mothers in the neighborhood how to stretch their food budgets while still making nutritious meals. She spoke about how her church's covered dish suppers had brought together people who wouldn't normally share a meal, and how her cornbread had been present at every major event: births, graduations, funerals, celebrations. But the most powerful moment came when she looked directly into the camera and spoke to anyone watching who might be struggling. If you're hungry, find someone who cooks with love. If you can cook, find someone who's hungry. That's how we take care of each other. That's how we survive. That's how we thrive. As she finished the demonstration, the cornbread batter ready for the oven, something unexpected happened. Olga Petrova, the grandmother from the opposing family, walked onto the stage carrying a tray of her family's signature honey cake. "In my country," Olga said in accented English, "we have a saying: when you share bread with someone, you share life. Your family won the money, but we all won something more important today. We witnessed love." The two grandmothers embraced, and Olga insisted that Big Mama taste the honey cake while she tried some of the cornbread batter. It was a moment of cultural exchange and mutual respect that transcended competition. Steve Harvey, seizing the moment, made an announcement that would change everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're witnessing something special here. Two grandmothers, from different backgrounds, different cultures, but united by the same truth. Food is love. Food is family. Food is how we connect across every divide." He turned to the cameras. "I'm going to make some calls. These grandmothers, these recipes, these stories, they need to be preserved and shared. This is bigger than a game show. This is about preserving our heritage, all of our heritages." What happened after that Family Feud episode was nothing short of miraculous. The show aired 3 weeks later, but clips had already gone viral from audience members' social media posts. Within hours of the broadcast, Food Network executives were calling. They wanted to create a special series called Grandmother's Kitchen, Recipes That Built America, featuring Big Mama, Olga Petrova, and other grandmothers from various cultural backgrounds sharing their recipes and stories. But the impact went far beyond television. Marcus used part of the $100,000 prize money to help Big Mama establish Big Mama's Community Kitchen, a nonprofit organization that would preserve her recipes and continue her mission of feeding anyone who was hungry. They converted an old church building in Memphis into a community center where cooking classes were taught, meals were served, and different cultural groups could share their food traditions. The cornbread recipe that Big Mama had demonstrated on Family Feud was published in newspapers and magazines across the country, always accompanied by her message about the secret ingredient being love. Restaurants began featuring Big Mama's cornbread on their menus, with proceeds going to local food banks. The moment when Marcus had said, "Grandmother's cornbread brings people together," became a rallying cry for a national movement celebrating intergenerational wisdom and cultural food traditions. Schools started Grandparents' Recipe Day, where elderly community members would come share their cooking knowledge with students. Big Mama's diagnosis with dementia had initially seemed like a cruel countdown clock on her ability to share her knowledge. But the Family Feud appearance had created something permanent. Her recipes, her techniques, and most importantly, her philosophy of feeding people with love had been captured forever. A cookbook was published, with Marcus transcribing not just recipes but the stories that went with each dish. The cookbook, titled The Secret Ingredient, Big Mama's Recipes for Feeding Body and Soul, became a bestseller. But true to Big Mama's spirit, all proceeds went to feeding programs in underserved communities. The introduction, written by Steve Harvey himself, spoke about how that moment on Family Feud had reminded him that game shows at their best could be platforms for celebrating what makes us human. 6 months after the episode aired, Big Mama was invited to speak at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. Despite her progressing dementia, she stood before the audience and delivered a speech that would be remembered as one of the most moving testimonies about food, family, and resilience in American history. "Every recipe tells a story," she said. her voice clear and strong. My cornbread tells the story of my grandmother's grandmother, who learned to make something from nothing. It tells the story of my mother, who fed striking sanitation workers during the Memphis strike. It tells the story of my community, where nobody goes hungry if I have flour in my pantry," she continued. "But most importantly, it tells the story of tomorrow. Every time someone makes this cornbread, every time they feed someone who's hungry, every time they bring people together around a table, the story continues. That's immortality. That's legacy. That's love." The Food Network series premiered 8 months after the Family Feud episode. Grandmother's Kitchen became their highest-rated show, featuring not just recipes, but the stories of immigration, struggle, triumph, and community that each dish represented. Big Mama's episode, where she taught viewers how to set up a community kitchen and feed large groups on a small budget, won an Emmy for outstanding instructional programming. But perhaps the most beautiful development came from an unexpected source. Researchers studying dementia and memory noticed something remarkable about Big Mama and other elderly cooks featured on the show. While they might forget recent events or people's names, their procedural memory for cooking remained intact. This observation led to new therapeutic programs using cooking as a way to help dementia patients maintain their sense of identity and purpose. Marcus established the Secret Ingredient Foundation, using the remaining prize money and book proceeds to create a program where young people could learn traditional recipes from elderly community members before those recipes were lost. The foundation partnered with nursing homes, senior centers, and community organizations to create Recipe Preservation Days, where families could document their culinary heritage. The ripple effects continued. The Petrova family, inspired by their experience on the show, started their own initiative teaching immigrant families how to preserve their food traditions while adapting to American ingredients. They often collaborated with Big Mama's Community Kitchen, creating fusion dishes that celebrated both cultures. Steve Harvey made good on his promise to preserve these stories. He produced a documentary called The Secret Ingredient, which followed several families as they rediscovered their grandmothers, recipes, and the stories behind them. The film featured the Family Feud episode as its centerpiece, showing how one moment of authentic emotion on television had sparked a nationwide movement to preserve culinary heritage. 3 years after that fateful game show appearance, Big Mama's health had declined significantly. She no longer recognized many family members and couldn't remember recent events. But she could still make her cornbread. Her hands remembered every motion, every measurement. Marcus would bring her to the community kitchen, and she would teach classes, her muscle memory guiding her even when her conscious memory failed. During what would be her last public appearance, Big Mama stood in her community kitchen, surrounded by hundreds of people she had fed over the years. She couldn't remember most of their names, but she knew they were family. As she mixed the cornbread batter one more time, she spoke words that would become the motto of the movement she had inspired. Feed people like they're your family. That's how you change the world. One meal at a time. She passed away 6 months later, but her legacy was secure. The community kitchen continued to serve hundreds of meals daily. Her recipes were being made in homes across America. Young people who had never met her were learning not just to cook, but to understand cooking as an act of love and resistance. The Johnson family returned to Family Feud for a special Champions episode, this time with Marcus's daughter representing the next generation. When Steve Harvey asked her what she had learned from Big Mama, the 12-year-old responded with wisdom beyond her years. Big Mama taught me that recipes aren't just instructions. They're love letters to the future. Every time I make her cornbread, she's still here, still feeding people, still bringing families together. The impact of that single Family Feud episode continued to grow. Universities created courses studying food as cultural preservation. The Library of Congress established an archive for family recipes and their stories. Communities across America started their own versions of Big Mama's Community Kitchen. The $100,000 prize had been life-changing for the Johnson family, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of simply improving their own lives, They had used it to preserve and share a legacy that touched millions. Big Mama's simple philosophy, feed people like their family, had reminded America of something fundamental about human connection. Marcus often reflected on that moment when he had answered, "Grandmother's cornbread brings people together," and how it had changed everything. He realized that Big Mama had known what would happen. She had given him that recipe during the game not because he might need it for an answer, but because she knew that sharing it would be the real prize. The Food Network series continued for 5 seasons, featuring grandmothers from every cultural background imaginable. Each episode ended with the same message that Big Mama had written on that piece of paper. The secret ingredient is love. The series won multiple awards and was credited with preserving hundreds of traditional recipes that might otherwise have been lost. This extraordinary story reminds us that our greatest inheritance isn't money or property. It's the wisdom, traditions, and love passed down through generations. Big Mama's cornbread recipe was never just about cornbread. It was about understanding that we have the power to nourish not just bodies but souls, to build community through generosity, and to preserve our heritage by sharing it freely. The Johnson family's Family Feud victory proves that when we honor our elders' wisdom and share their stories, we create ripples that can transform communities and preserve cultures for future generations. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of your own family's traditions, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their family recipes and stories matter. And most importantly, go ask your grandmother, grandfather, or any elder in your life about their recipes. Not just the ingredients, but the stories behind them. Document them, preserve them, share them. Because as Big Mama taught us all, when you feed people like their family, you really can change the world, one meal at a time. Remember to subscribe and ring the notification bell to hear more incredible stories about families whose lives were transformed in the most unexpected ways. Your family's story matters. And who knows, the next viral moment of human connection might come from your own kitchen table.